Greetings, Star Citizens, and today is Bomber Week in the Galactic Tour series. So we're taking a look at one of two bombers competing for Bomber of the Year, which is the Anvil Gladiator. So the Anvil Gladiator on the wings has equipped two M4A laser cannons, and it also has two Bulldog repeaters on the turret, which I've changed for 9 series longswords. However, the main show of the Gladiator, with it being a bomber, is obviously this payload on the wing and in the belly. So on each wing you've got 4 size 2 Tempest 2 missiles, and in the belly you have 4 size 5 torpedoes, which is more than enough to take out ships much larger than yourself, which makes the Gladiator very good for taking out much more expensive ships and much more bigger ships than yourself. Now, getting into the Gladiator is a little bit of a party trick. It's got a very interesting way of entering. The seats come down in from under the landing gear, and then you sit in them and then they raise back up. And that's the same for the turret. However, as you can see, it's not quite been refined yet. So it's got a little bit of work to do, but regardless, you can get in and out of the ship, and it doesn't bug out terribly, it just looks a bit weird. So now that we're out in the universe, I've got a little bit of a confession to make, and that is, this is my absolute first time flying this ship. So with all of my other quantum test drives, we've been flying ships that I've been very familiar with and that I've flown many times. However, I've never flown a Gladiator, so I have no idea how she handles. I've got a little bit of a feeling just based off sort of statistics and what I've seen from other people, but I don't know exactly how she flies. But my first impression, she handles pretty well. She's obviously sluggish. She does have 4 massive torpedoes in the belly, so it's to be expected that she's not going to be super agile, and that is why I went with all the gimbal. Normally I would change the wing weapons to be fixed size 3s, and I would turn off gimbaling so the turret didn't gimbal, and I would have it fixed. But I wasn't too sure how well this ship would turn, which is why I stuck with the gimbaled. But seeing how she turns, I probably would stick with the fixed. It's not as bad as I originally anticipated. However, let's make our way to this comm array, find some pirates, and we'll try and kill some pirates. So obviously, because you get that turret slave to you, you've got massive range of attack. If you do use gimbal weapons, you can do a full 360 degree. Obviously you can't really look behind you very easily other than using key bindings to do so, but either way you can look behind you and you can shoot behind you if you manage to do so. Obviously it's going to be more ideal to have a second person in that turret seat to make the full use of keeping on target, and then you don't have to worry about lining up your pips. So you can see I've gone with longswords, which don't line up anywhere near close to the laser cannons that we've got, and I honestly don't know why I went with longswords. I just kind of thought I'd be a bit different. I'd just go with longswords. The Bulldog repeater is actually better. It is better to go with the default loadout if you're going for a gimbaled setup, but regardless, I've gone with the longsword just because whatever. But obviously if you do have that second gunner in that turret seat instead of slaving it to the pilot, then you don't have to worry about velocities, and you don't have to worry so much about staying on target. It'll be a lot easier to keep hits on your target, and it will give you that sort of edge in a dogfight. Now, ideally you don't want to take a Gladiator into a dogfight. It's not really a dogfighter. Obviously it is classified as a bomber, and I would sort of say it's a missile boat, but it is a bomber. It does have the bombs, obviously it's got the torpedoes, and I believe in the future we'll have options for actual ground bombs, which would be really cool for sort of atmospheric flight. It'd be extremely cool to fly into an atmosphere with some ground bombs and just drop them on something, whether it be a station, an enemy. I don't know what you would actually bomb, but it does sound fun. It sounds like something I would be interested in. I've always enjoyed bombers in games like War Thunder. I've always preferred the bombers. There's something satisfying about just dropping a massive bomb on something and just watching it blow into a million pieces. So I really can't wait for atmospheric bombs, if we do get them, which I believe we will do. So obviously you don't really want to be getting into a dogfight because you are a bomber, and you could sort of find yourself getting into dogfights with a ship like this because it looks like it's a fighter. It is probably more on the fighter bomber side more than the Retaliator. The Retaliator is more like the heavy stealth bomber, whereas this is sort of the fighter bomber because it looks like a fighter, and to be honest it kind of flies a bit like a fighter. It's not too dissimilar to the way the Hornet handles. Obviously it's made by Anvil, same as the Hornet, so it looks similar to the Hornet and it sort of flies similar to the Hornet in my opinion. So you could really sort of mislead yourself into thinking you're in a fighter, not a bomber. But obviously at the end of the day you don't have the same sort of agility or speed as a fighter, but you will be able to hold your own. I mean, you've got 2 size 3s and 2 size 1s. I mean, size 1s aren't much to write home about, but the 2 size 3s will help you defend yourself quite well. Obviously it's not a terrible loadout, especially if you manage to get the pips to line up, which, like I say, I've not gone for in this. I don't know why I went with the longswords. It was a terrible idea. I don't even like the longswords. I don't know. I just went with the longswords and I regret that decision. So let's just go with a bit more of missiles. They seem to be bugging out, but obviously in a fight you're gonna want to use your missiles. You've got tons of them. You've got massive ones, especially when you get to the torpedoes. At the moment we can't change what missile we fire, so it just goes through the cycle, and I believe it fires off the small wing missiles first. So I'm just going to keep draining out my missiles until we get to those big ones. But you know, anyone that's played in Arena Commander or flown around Korea knows just how annoying it is to get hit with missile after missile after missile, because you're just constantly flaring and you're not really concentrating. It's got a bit of a fear element to it because you're not concentrating on dodging shots, you're not concentrating on getting shots, you're more concentrating on dodging the giant torpedo that's coming towards you. So yeah, I think that's all those pirates dealt with. I'm not going to deal with this ICC probe because I honestly don't want to risk trying to get out of this ship with how buggy it is. I'm not sure what happens if you go through that event in space. It might work flawlessly, it might actually work in space, but I'm not going to find out. I'm going to save that for another time, or I'll save that for you to find out. So obviously the Gladiator at the moment, as of today, up until the 23rd, is free for all backers to fly because it is part of the Galactic Tour's Bomber of the Year between this and the Retaliator. Now, do I think it's a better bomber than the Retaliator? Not necessarily, no. I wouldn't say it's a better bomber because it isn't a dedicated bomber like the Retaliator. The Retaliator is a born and bred bomber. That's its pretty much only purpose. You can't really do any sort of fighting with it. I mean, you kinda can, but it's not the same traditional kind of fighting, because obviously in the Retaliator the pilot doesn't have any guns for himself. He only has manned turrets, which you need a crew to operate, so it's not really gonna get into any sort of fights in that same sort of regard. It's gonna be hunting the big capital ships, the carrier ships, the corvettes, and it is a true bomber, whereas the Gladiator is a bit more versatile in that you could use it as a fighter if you absolutely have to. It's just not really recommended to do so because it's not going to compete with some of the best fighters, but it will definitely hold its own. And I think that's one thing it has above the Retaliator as a ship in general, just as an overall ship, just an overall ship to use. However, when we specify the act of bombing, I don't think it's a better bomber. It's got weaker bombs and it's got less bombs, and it's just a much smaller ship, so it's not going to compete on the same sort of bombing level as something like a Retaliator, so it's an unfair competition. I think the Retaliator is winning at the moment, but I also think a lot of people vote more on appearance and style, and the Retaliator is an absolutely beautiful ship, so I can't really blame them. But you can see that missile took that guy out in one missile. It's not really a surprise right there. These pirates aren't the toughest, but yeah, I think we're on to our big torpedoes now. I'm not too sure. We've got massive heating issues with our longswords there. Our longswords aren't doing well with the heats. I'll just put a bit more power to the weapons. We'll try to finish this guy off with the longswords. It's been a bit of a pain. We don't have any more missiles there, so that last one must have actually been a big one, which explains why it was such a big and quick explosion and why it killed him, even being absolutely nowhere near him. So that is those pirates dealt with, and that has been our look at the Gladiator. I think it's an amazing ship. I'm not personally going to get one just because I don't really have a purpose for it, but I think if you're looking for a ship that can do a little bit of dogfighting, but you also want a ship that is capable of bombing targets, maybe killing, well, I wouldn't say killing capital ships, but you could definitely put a dent in a capital ship. You could probably put a big dent in something like a carrier. You could definitely put a massive dent in a corvette, and just generally take out ships much bigger than your weight. So obviously a Gladiator could easily take out stuff like Constellations, Starfarers, Reclaimers, Hull series. Those sort of ships you could easily take out with a ship like this, which when you look at other ships of the same size as the Gladiator, they would really struggle with ships of that size. They'd struggle really putting any sort of damage into it, and the Gladiator is going to easily be able to do that. So that's been my look at the Gladiator. I think it's an amazing ship, and I will see you guys in the next video. Laters, taters.